YouTube, what's up? Alright. Here's another reading of the Weber. The Weber Guide to Pipes, Pipe, and Pipe Smoking. Now, I've had a few talkings with a few of the YouTube pipers. Now, when I read this, the best thing to do is just put on earbuds or whatever and carry on. Or if you're at home, just turn your laptop on or whatever and just let it play and go on about your business doing whatever you got to do. Because there's really nothing to look at. I wish I was better equipped to do a video, a slideshow or something while I was reading, but some people, like Saddle Tramp Piper, was driving, and it's kind of nice when it's a longer video and cover more of the book. And I've had like 3 or 4 people tell me that, so I may just, read more of it as we go along, because a couple of these, the old time stuff in here, it gets, kind of boring sometimes, but when it gets to the meat and potatoes, those are coming up here shortly. But where we left off last time, we left off at tobacco was discovered in the New World. Although Christopher Columbus is generally thought of as a man who discovered America, some modern historians tell us that earlier explorers, among them the Vikings, precede him to the lands of the Western Hemisphere, but Columbus regains some of his lost glamour through his authorship of the first accounts of tobacco smoking. In 1942, while sailing off the coast of Cuba, Columbus, mistakenly believing that he had reached the East Indies, sent ashore 2 emissaries, with letters of introduction to the Khan of Cathay. The Spaniards visited many native villages, but found neither gold nor the Khan of Cathay, C-A-T-H-A-Y, but related instead that they had met with great multitudes of people, men, women, with firebrands in their hands and herbs to smoke after their custom previously. Columbus also had written in his journal of a friendly offer of tobacco leaves from the natives as follows: Monday, October 25th, being at sea, about midway between Santa Maria and the large island which I named Fernandina, we met a man in a canoe going from Santa Maria to Fernandina. He had with him a piece of bread which the natives make as big as one's fist, and some dried leaves which are a high value among them, for a quality of it was brought to me at San Salvador. But at the time neither Columbus nor his fellow explorers knew what use the Indians made of dry leaves. Indeed, Columbus not only failed to realize that he had discovered a new continent, he also failed to bring to light the stimulating effects of tobacco and smoking. European explorers did not find out about the pleasures of smoking until several decades later. Some explorers reported seeing primitive South American Indians smoking through the nose rather than through the mouth. Many early Indian pipes consisted of Y-shaped fork reeds, hollowed out to receive tobacco. The 2 ends of the fork were pressed in the nostrils, and the smoke was inhaled through the nose. This form of smoking is probably more instinctive, smoking through the mouth. Since it is our sense of smell that first introduces us to the fragrant aroma of burning tobacco leaves, eventually the Indians abandoned the nose smoking and took up smoking through the mouth. The new method was much more convenient. For now, the smoker could clamp the pipe between his teeth, leaving both hands free, and fill the pipe and light the tobacco. The Spanish observers related how the Indians would smoke intensely until intoxicating, inhaling the strong smoke through their noses until numbed and exhausted. They fall asleep. Their womenfolk would then carry the Indians to their hammocks and leave them lying there until they sobered up. The word tobacco originally did not refer to the leaves or the plant, but rather to the device through which the Indians used to smoke the brown leaves. The Spaniards met many natives smoking dried tobacco rolled inside broad, dry leaves of Indian corn. The corn leaves formed a kind of pipe which the Indians called tobago or tobacco, a name promptly adopted by the Spaniards. The plant itself and its leaves were called by a variety of names such as cohiba, petum, picelt, yolo, or upwalk. I don't know. Today, some form of the Spanish term tobacco turns up in most languages. One of the first descriptions of tobacco smoking in the New World reached France through the report of Jacques Cartier, who explored the St. Lawrence River as far as where Montreal, Canada, now stands in giving his account of the voyage. Cartier describes the Indians' use of tobacco. Their growth also was certain kind of herb, whereof in summer they make great provision for all year, making a great account of it, and only men use it. First they cause it to be dried in the sun and wear it about their necks, wrapped in little best skin with hollow piece of stone or wood like a pipe. I don't understand what I just read, but then when they please, they make a powder of it and then put it in one of the ends of the said pipe, and laying a coal of fire upon it at the other end, suck so long that they fill their bodies full of smoke till it cometh out of their mouth, mouth and nostrils, even as out of a chimney. They said that this doth keep them warm in health. See, they used weird words back then, and some of these I can't pronounce, so forgive me on that. They never go without some of it about them. The 16th century French explorer and his fellow countrymen had little liking for the peppery fumes. The tobacco was not mentioned again in France for another 20 years. When the conquering Spaniards first witnessed the American Indians puffing violently at smoldering tobacco leaves, they tried it out themselves and soon fell into a habit of pipe smoking. The sailors then proceeded to carry the practice of pipe smoking back to Europe, where it grew and spread. The settlers in the New World were quick to exploit the increasingly demand for tobacco in Europe, and many British colonists in Virginia made small fortunes in tobacco cultivations. At first, they grew the native North American variety Nicotiana rustica, which they had seen raised by the Indians, but the fortunes of the tobacco growers greatly increased after 1612, when then John Rolfe, the husband of the Indian princess Pocahontas imported seeds of West Indian tobacco, Nicotiana tabacum, to Jamestown. This more desirable variety was an instant success, and from then on every British-bound ship leaving the colony carried many bales of tobacco in its hold. By this time, the value of tobacco had become so universal and so well established that the settlers used it as currency. Some of the colonists starved for female company in the predominantly male settlements, advertised in England for wives offering tobacco in payment for their passage. When they were willing to deliver 150 pounds of tobacco for the passage of each of 100 young women of agreeable person and respectable character, making each prospective bride literally worth her weight in tobacco. I know my pipes and my tobacco were like money in the bank. Jean Nicot and nicotine. That's what it says right down here. Jean Nicot and nicotine. Much of the early popularity of tobacco in Europe rested on its supposed medical properties rather than on its pleasurable smoking qualities. The tobacco leaf was introduced as a universal remedy for all ailments by the Frenchmen. Jean Nicot, from both the tobacco plant nicotina and the term nicotine, derived their name. Nicot, appointed ambassador to Portugal, and the French Queen Catherine de Medici first saw the plant growing in the royal gardens of Lisbon. Learning that the Indians believed the plant too have healing powers, the ambassador decided to experiment. As Nicot's chef happened to have sliced his thumb with a kitchen knife, Nicot bandaged the cut with a fresh green tobacco leaf. Surprising, the wound healed. The young lady acquaintance of Nicot's had a severe rash on her face, and the gentleman friend had sharp pains in his foot. In both cases, after an application of tobacco leaves, the maladies disappeared. Nicot pursued his experiments, and not long afterward returned to France, where he informed the Queen of marvelous cures which the plant had effected. One day, when the Queen was suffering from a severe headache, Nicot suggested that she sniff some powder he had crushed from dried tobacco, snuff, which we know today. The Queen agreeably took a pinch of brown powder and sneezed. After a few more sneezes, the Queen remembered her headache only to find considerably improved. From that moment, the Queen of France became an ardent snuff enthusiast. The French court followed her example, and the popularity of tobacco spread throughout the country. For many years, the plant was called the Queen's herb, or the Medicis herbs. Even those not suffering from a headache thought they should avoid the risk of getting one by an occasional sniff or two of snuff taken rapidly become very fashionable. But snuff was not as yet taken purely for pleasure. It was still considered strictly a medicinal preparation, to be purchased at local apothecaries. I know what that word means, but I don't know how to say it. Apothecary. Physicians gave the powder somewhat repugnant Latin name Salistrium nasi, which is literally translated means nasal purge. An encyclopedia published at the time by Nicot himself provides the following listing. Nicotine, a herb with miraculous healing powers against all complaints such as boils, open sores, rashes, etc. It was introduced by France by the envoy of the King of Portugal, Mr. Jean Nicot, after whom it derived his name. The name Nicotiana was given to the tobacco plant not by Nicot himself, but by the famed Swedish botanist Linnaeus to acknowledge Nacot's efforts in encouraging the plant's general use. Nacot did not live to see the medical observations discredited as having little scientific value, nor did he see snuff abused and vulgarized by being taken merely for its pleasurable sensations. In popularizing snuff, Nacot inadvertently also helped to introduce smoking. A pinch of snuff or a pipe of tobacco both produced a stimulating effect. Whether one smoked or took snuff was just a matter of taste. When Frenchmen were first taking snuff, Englishmen were smoking pipes. But later on, when snuff became fashionable in England, pipe smoking had already spread throughout the rest of Europe. After Europe had sufficient time to try both ways, the taste for smoking triumphed. Tobacco in England. The English took tobacco without regard for the medical attributes from which French credited to it. They found smoking gratifying and enjoyed it for a unique pleasure it afforded. The man who first introduced tobacco in England was an English naval hero, Sir John Hawkins, who brought a supply from Florida as early as 1565. The next English sea captain to visit the Western Hemisphere was Sir Francis Drake, returned to England from the West Indies in 1573. It seems incredible to think that in this short period, from 1565 to 1573, the novelty of smoking should have spread so rapidly throughout England. In the medical work published in 1570, the authors state that within a few years, tobacco had become an inmate of England, and describes tobacco smoking as follows. You see many sailors and all those who come back from America carrying like funnels made from palm leaf or a reed in the extreme end of which they insert rolled or powdered leaves from a plant. A History of England, published a few years later, provides the following description of tobacco smoking in the year 1573. In these days, the taking of the smoke of the Indian herb called tobacco by the instrument formed like a little ladle, whereby it passes through the mouth into the head and stomach, is greatly taken up and used in England. Although Sir Walter Raleigh did not initiate the use of tobacco into England, he was the man largely responsible for making it fashionable, especially in court circles. He later introduced the tobacco plant and its poor cousin, the potato, to Ireland. The tobacco plant and the potato are botanically related. Sir Walter, like many other adventurers of the day, enjoyed the gifts which the New World had to offer. He attracted a great deal of attention with his pipe and made many converts to pipe smoking. But smoking was still a novelty, and the smoker of that time sometimes suffered at the hands of those who were ignorant of the habit. According to the story, Sir Walter Raleigh happened to employ a new servant who had never witnessed tobacco smoking. One day, upon entering his master's room, he saw thick columns of smoke emerging from Sir Walter Raleigh's mouth. Thinking that the tankard of beer from the table One day upon entering his master's room, he saw thick columns of smoke emerging from Sir Walter's mouth. Thinking that his master's insides were on fire, he rushed forward, snatched a tankard of beer from the table, and emptied it over Sir Walter Raleigh's head. Sir Walter, also the hero of another equally creditable story, although the swashbuckling English explorers and seafarers were very popular with Queen Elizabeth, not one of them had dared to light his pipe in her presence, for it was said that the Queen did not favor the new craze. At last Sir Walter decided to introduce the pipe into the royal chamber, as the Queen's mind could only be changed by indirect and elegant persuasion. Okay, so where I left off, I ran out of battery, so we left off. One day, while the presence of the Queen, he quietly took out his pipe and began filling it. Before the Queen could object, Sir Walter asked with a smile if Her Majesty thought that he could weigh the smoke from his pipe. The Queen could not imagine how this could possibly be done, but Sir Walter offered to perform the feat and even persuaded the Queen to bet a handful of gold on the outcome. Sir Walter first asked the chemist of the court to bring his most delicate scale, carefully filling his pipe. He placed it on the scale and asked the chemist to note its weight. Sir Walter then settled down to the comfortable smoke while the Queen and her courtiers watched attentively. When he had finished, he left the ashes in the pipe, which was once more weighed by the chemist. Sir Walter then turned to the Queen and said, "If the present weight of the pipe is subtracted from its weight before I started smoking, the difference must be the weight of that which has disappeared, that your pipe, that is, Your Majesty, the weight of the smoke." The Queen graciously concealed the point that gave Sir Walter the promised handful of gold coins, saying, "I have met many chemists who have let gold go up in smoke, but only you, Sir Walter, have I seen transmute smoke into gold." With the remark, pipe smoking was officially introduced into Queen Elizabeth's court and in fashionable circles throughout England. Sir Walter always remained a heavy smoker, and later in his life, after had lost his opportunity at court and was imprisoned in the Tower of London, his pipe became a comfortable companion in his lonely cell. All right, that was the end of chapter 1. We're going on to chapter 2, which is much more interesting. The Briar and the Meerschaum, King and Queen of Pipes. This is the better one here. See you next time. Later, YouTube.